Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Designated Driver. We've got another exciting episode for you where we introduce another database to the Superset community and introduce Superset to another database community, which is always exciting for us. We'll go ahead and do a little bit of quick intros as always. I'm Evan Rusakis, a committer and PMC member on the Apache Superset project and working with Preset for a little over 4 or 5 years. I don't know, a while. But data viz nerd and all that kind of stuff. But I'll pass it over to our real database expert, Beto.
Oh, I try my best. I'm Beto. I work at Preset as a software engineer. I've been working with Superset for 7 years now, and I do a lot of work integrating Superset with databases. I wrote like some connectors for Druid, Google Sheets, Pinot, and I work closely with ClickHouse people to do the connector. So I'm excited to talk to Robert today. Robert?
Yeah, so my name's Robert, and I'm the CEO of Altinity. We're a service provider and software for ClickHouse. We can run it in the cloud. We can support it if you want to run it yourself. And then we have kind of a middle ground where you give us a Kubernetes somewhere, and we'll supply the management and the databases and keep your data safe.
Fantastic. And maybe first order of business before we go deep on Altinity is this is a happy hour podcast, and we usually bring a beer to this thing, but today's a little different. Maybe, Robert, you could tell us about what you brought today and what your company's kind of into.
I'll just show it. This is a Boulevardier. And for those of you who like Negronis, this is basically a bourbon Negroni. So it has Maker's Mark. It has Bordiga red vermouth, and it has Campari, and it is absolutely delicious. If you make one, I also highly recommend a slice of the orange peel to top it off. Cheers.
Nice. Cheers.
And Beto, what
okay, go next. I have an old-fashioned with, I don't know if you can see, but it has 2 cherries.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
My girlfriend doesn't drink, but she loves the cherry. So I put 2, one for me, one for her, once I'm done. And this is Knob Creek.
Yes, very well known and popular bourbon.
Cool. And same here, whipped up an old-fashioned as well. Went with the Luxardo cherries, San Francisco specialty.
Same one, yeah. That's the exact same one.
Yeah, they're the good ones. I've been trying out all the others, but keep coming home to that one.
Yeah.
So thank you, Anchor, for continuing to exist and import those.
Did you guys ever try the Amarena cherries?
Yeah.
Oh, that looks good.
And then I got the Whistle Pig. I've got a couple of different Whistle Pigs, but this 6-year one is a little more affordable for cocktails.
Yeah.
But yeah, cheers officially.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Excellent. I sort of jumped the gun there.
Oh, no worries. There's this is supposed to be.
I think I jumped the gun even first.
Get right into it.
Yeah. One thing about it's interesting. You guys we're all doing bourbon drinks today. I think one of the great lessons in life is you don't need an expensive bourbon to make a great mixed drink.
That's true.
Yeah.
One of the virtues of that particular alcohol.
Yeah, I've had some very fancy spirits in cocktails, and I always feel a little ashamed of myself when I do that.
Yeah.
but it sure is good.
I can't tell the difference personally, but
yeah, people often agonize over the right way to have such things, but the right way is however you enjoy it.
Yep. The best drink is the one you have on your hand.
That's true.
Usually.
Cool. So maybe, Robert, I'd love to hear a little bit about Altinity and ClickHouse. Maybe you can tell us kind of what you know, the origin stories of both, how they intersect. How did this road lead you here?
Sure. Let me start with ClickHouse. So ClickHouse started back in 2009. It was a project inside Yandex, which is a pretty big Russian tech company with the headquarters in Moscow. Well, technically they were a Dutch company, but anyway, they had a problem. They have a really good web analytics product called Metrica. It's sort of the one you use if you don't use Google Analytics. Mm-hmm. And they were using MySQL as the back end. And the problem with web analytics is you need to do all these aggregates across different slices of data, and MySQL just couldn't hack it. So they looked around, they considered commercial databases, didn't find anything that was to their liking. And so a guy named Alexei Molovidov ended up writing a kind of report engine that could do aggregation on web analytic data. And the idea was that you should be able to run the query without having to pre-aggregate the data. That was the place where they're having problems. You don't want to have to guess what the user is going to do. You just have something that's fast enough. It can use storage efficiently, lots of compression. It can parallelize, and it can get you the answer just straight off the source data. So that was 2009. They used it in-house for about 7 years, open sourced it in 2016. By that time, they'd added a whole bunch of SQL to it. It started out with some very, very slim dialect, but was quite capable by that time. They then released it under the Apache license, and it just took off. One of the big users here was in the Bay Area was Cloudflare. They wrote a blog article about how they were pounding like 1 million events per second into it, and a bunch of other people had success, and that was really the beginning of a big success story for open source. And the way we got involved was I'm not a founder of the company, but I am very good friends with Alexander Zaitsev, who's our CTO and one of the founders, and he was running a real-time ad bidding analytics group that was an ad business running a network, have to figure out hey, how much what's the value of an impression? This is a very basic question you answer in this, and it requires going through billions of rows of data sometimes to get good answers. And they adopted ClickHouse, and it worked great. It was really getting great results on very, very cheap hardware, desktop drives, off the shelf Intel CPUs, but it was really raw. So he started a company to help people to use this database. And they started with consulting and education, quickly added 24/7 support. In 2019, we started making fixes to, making PRs to ClickHouse itself. I went ahead and developed a cloud that we released in 2020. And then also wrote a Kubernetes operator for it. And basically, sort of built from there. So it started out as an open source service bureau and then turned into this full service provider for MySQL, no matter where you want to run it or what you want to do. And that's basically the business today.
Okay. Cool. Well, I guess I'm happy to say that this does work really well with Superset.
It's excellent with Superset. Yeah.
Usually I make some joke about beer pairing or wine pairing or something. I don't know if there's such thing as bourbon pairing, but these products do fit nicely.
Yeah.
As we've seen.
I think they fit together great, because I think we're one of the things about us is as a provider is we make our money off support and management, but the stack itself is totally open source. And so to work with Superset and with Preset is really kind of on brand for us. The same people that will pick something like ClickHouse because they can understand the stack, they can work with somebody to evolve it or submit PRs themselves, they can distribute it. Those are the same people that would gravitate toward a product like Superset. And so it's kind of a natural fit. And in fact, what's cool about Superset is it's actually one of the few really capable BI tools that's truly open source. So I think it has kind of a unique niche in the IT economy.
And they have something special, actually. Like when we started doing Superset, because we support so many databases, we need to have abstractions to talk to them, right? We use SQL Alchemy. Superset is written in Python. We use SQL Alchemy, which offers a lot of abstractions, to talk to different databases. But there are many things that we need that SQL Alchemy doesn't provide. I think the most basic one is how you aggregate over time, right? So if you want to compute a metric, like a monthly metric, some databases, the dialect will use the function date trunc. Some other databases will use something else. So we need to have that abstraction in Superset, and we call it a DB engine spec in Superset. So it's the abstraction that lives on top of SQL Alchemy. And a few years ago, we added support for third-party DB engine specs. So if you want to create your own abstraction for your database, it doesn't have to be part of Superset. You can have a different release cadence, and and ClickHouse actually was the first company, the first database that actually made their own DB engine spec. So
Mhm.
it's developed separately from Superset. If you want to do a bug fix, you just need to update that
Right.
part of the stack, which is really nice.
Right. Yeah. In fact, if I could say so, I think one of the real strengths and sort of joys of using Superset is it has a good sense of abstraction in the design.
Yeah.
And I think the most obvious example is just the whole virtual data set model. Works better in Superset than any other product I've used. It's and in fact, there was an interesting talk at one of our conferences a couple of years ago where somebody's saying, hey, Superset is great because you can provide these virtual data sets and kind of tweak them, and people can even make their own without having to go and mess with the databases. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty powerful, and you guys did that really well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of the power of Superset is just because you have like big companies using it, smaller companies, and you really need to like adapt for different use cases. So we end up abstracting a lot of things. There's like interfaces for how do you handle permissioning, and I don't know. There's like so many things. You can inject your own React components on the UI, right? Because we need to have that because of all the different use cases.
One thing I'm curious about is SQL Alchemy is for people. I'm more of an early binding kind of guy, so C++, Java, Go, something that's like, hey, if it's not type safe, the compiler is just going to stop you right now. So I find SQL Alchemy really hard to work with. I have put in a couple of PRs in the one of the ClickHouse or one of the Python drivers to help with this integration, but it definitely requires some real skill and sort of a sense of Python. I'm just wondering what your take is on that for like how is it you get your head around SQL Alchemy and using those APIs?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using it for a decade now, and it's interesting because the documentation is very deep and technical, but I think they don't have the high level. They don't say like this is how you'd use it. It's very like it's always very technical and specific, and like sometimes I want to write a query and I'm using like because SQL Alchemy it basically started as an ORM, and then eventually they realized there was value in building queries like programmatically as a way, and then compile that to the specific SQL dialect, right? That's how we use it. We build a query object, and then depending on the database, we basically compile it to SQL. But sometimes I have the query in mind, I know how to write the SQL, and I'm trying to write it with SQL Alchemy. And it takes me like an hour just to, if you're doing like complex joins or the window function. And it's just
that because I know I've worked with databases for a really long time, and so what I tend to do is have just a shim layer that takes care of things like marshaling column values, into the appropriate data types for wherever they're landing after a query comes back. That's the kind of stuff where you don't want to write that again, but I'll then go straight to SQL and not try to put any abstraction around that. So it's definitely a very different experience.
It is, yeah. I every 5 years I write my own blog engine, to learn new technologies, new stack, new things. And the current version, it's just straight SQL. I'm just going to use SQLite, right? And I'm just going to write SQL. So the whole view layer is just writing SQL. It's like SQL statements. I was like, this is good enough. But SQL Alchemy is interesting. It because it allows us to do so much. We can talk to 50 different databases, right? Yeah. Because of SQL Alchemy, and over the time we build our own like dialect. So we have like if we need to support a new database, we have all the scaffolding ready. Yeah. And I built a library to create SQL Alchemy connections to like non-SQL databases. It's what we use for Google Sheets.
So here's a question. Like one of the things I've had to get my head around working with ClickHouse is because I started 6 years ago. And it was the first time I'd really gone deep on an analytic database. And so one of the things I really had to get my head around was time series. And if you could just describe in a sentence, what makes a database ready for use by a product like Superset, because you talked about the sort of the time series adaptation, sort of model extension you have on
Yeah.
top of SQL Alchemy. So clearly there's something you're looking for in that underlying layer. Maybe you could just characterize what that is.
So like you say, if you have a database you want to connect to Superset, what's the minimum set of features
Yeah, what's
you
the
would
minimum
need?
set of features? What are the features you're going to really lean on to make it, for
Yeah.
example, to show, to graph, oh, I don't know, 404 errors over time, something like that.
Yeah. I don't think there's much like if your database supports some kind of SQL, that's already a good step. Like Superset doesn't even need your database to support joins or subselects,
Right.
something like that. Like if we need to do a query that requires a join and your database doesn't support joins, we would do a two-phase query. So I don't think there's much, but yeah, I feel like time is such a special axis, right? That a lot of what you do with Superset is time series, is like time aggregations, daily,
Right.
weekly, month over month. So I think having the support for that.
Yeah, because one of the things I've noticed is, and I know in some front-end tools they have a preference for particular time types. Like, for example, a Unix timestamp, which is I guess is milliseconds, if I recall correctly. That's some tools really want to find a time, sort of a time type that is distinguished and has a certain granularity. I know for trading data, one of the things we ended up implementing was datetime 64 in ClickHouse. That was something that we implemented together with one of our big financial users, because they were doing high frequency trading and they needed very, very detailed, very granular timestamps. So that was an example where we had to extend ClickHouse, and then of course that's then manifested in the front end.
Yeah, but again, because Superset has all these has to deal with all different databases, it kind of addresses the common, not even the common denominator, but like in Superset, if you have Unix timestamp, it works. If you have a string for your time column, you can specify what's the format of your string, and it will parse.
And you guys will just sort of make up the difference.
Yeah, but ideally we want to have like a proper timestamp column. I think that's the best. Yeah.
Right. And there is our big your big comparison sheet bit though. That's the sort of like driver support where we check for different granularity support and all sorts of different things, and kind of give each database a little bit of a score.
Yeah.
I can post the link whenever we stick this video somewhere.
Right.
For those who want to dig into it.
Yeah. So we have a script that goes through all the databases and like gives them a score of how well they support the Superset features.
How does ClickHouse? I trust we're like in the high 90s or.
Well, to be fair, it's a completely I can try to check here, but to be fair, it's a completely arbitrary metric.
Yeah. For people who are listening and you're doing time series, you definitely want to look at ClickHouse.
And the scores are like, I just assign points to like, this is an essential feature, this is a.
If anybody's listening rather than watching, I apologize for the screen share right now. But
you're sharing it?
Yeah, so this is kind of, this left column here is all the little bits and pieces we test for all sorts of granularity.
Oh, yeah, this is great. Yeah.
And then up at the top, we've got all the different databases.
Oh my goodness.
If I get over to ClickHouse here.
Oh, a lot of truths. Oh no, some more falses.
So a score of 41. I don't know.
41. Okay.
I don't know where it falls off the wagon.
Who's the 78 on the?
What is that? Cockroach DB.
Cockroach DB. That's so. Is it the case that the closer you are to like full SQL support, the higher your score tends to be? Is there a pattern?
No, it's more about the Superset interface than the database itself. So like Evan was saying, when you define the time grains, usually you need to define, like, you can't just define a function, because like Superset like if you're building a time series, you can choose, I want daily, weekly, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, quarter, yearly, monthly, right? Week starting Monday, week starting Sunday. So those are usually easy to implement, but people usually just implement a few of them, like daily, weekly, monthly. And then some features, they don't make sense. Like I think SSH tunneling, like some databases you can connect, through an SSH tunnel.
Yes.
It's like, well, for ClickHouse, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
So I guess you could say in a lot of cases, it's not that the database doesn't support it. It's more that there's a little bit of something like technical debt where somebody could come along and add support for different features.
Yeah.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, this is more for like the superset DB engine spec for that
Right.
database. Doesn't
Mm.
tell how good or bad the database is.
Right.
So when you guys are developing stuff, what's the go-to database you use? It's, you know how you'll
Yeah.
have some like DuckDB or something like that, which
Mhm.
is pocket size, and you're developing, and you can make changes, you can do quick iterations. Do you have one
Yeah.
that's a favorite?
I use Postgres for like
Okay, yeah, totally makes sense.
if I'm
Yeah,
developing superset locally, I run Postgres. And for personal stuff, I've been using SQLite more and more.
yeah,
Yeah, same. Postgres is built in, when you're running it locally, but
yeah.
I've also been tinkering with MotherDuck and been pretty happy with that lately.
Oh, okay, yeah. For me, obviously, it's ClickHouse.
Yeah,
There can be
yeah.
no question. And I'm not even saying that because we sell it. It's just
Yeah.
that I do a lot of stuff that involves clusters, so it's ClickHouse on
Mhm.
Kubernetes.
Yeah, so
So
maybe
the
that
first thing,
actually.
and
Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Didn't mean to cut you
yeah.
off. Well,
It's sort of like, yeah, got to build something showing, multiple hosts working together in a cluster. Stick it on Kubernetes. Don't even bother trying to orchestrate containers or do it by hand. It's like, go straight to the source.
yeah, but that begs the question of, that we have a lot of superset users that are using ClickHouse, and if you were to pitch to our superset audience and say why they should be using Altinity, what are the kind of features and enterprise grade support things, and what all are you adding on top of that people should be aware of to give Altinity a try?
Yeah, I think actually, it's what we're not adding. It would be the first thing. We're 100% open source. So the company's already profitable. We don't, so we don't need to game, ClickHouse or any of the other open source offerings that we have. We already have a good business. So
Mhm.
if they're open now, they're going to stay open. And that's really important, because if you think about, just the ability, why do people like open source? Well, there's a lot of reasons. For me, it's I can understand what's going on inside. And I think
Mhm.
at a fundamental level, many, many, many companies need that
Mhm.
assurance that they can understand, evolve, distribute, use the technology any way they want. So
Yeah.
that's one.
Yeah.
Second thing is we allow people to run anywhere. And I think that's one of the overlooked strengths of ClickHouse, that, you can, somebody actually ran it in a phone. There was a blog article about that a few
Okay.
years ago, all the way up
Yeah.
to clusters. I'm working with one customer. They're planning to deploy about 600 servers running in Google Cloud. So that it works at these vastly different scales. And the thing is that people tend to have very strong, especially when you get to larger systems, people have a lot of constraints that, about where they can run things, what the economics have to look like, who they want to allow touching that system. And you want to give people the
Mhm.
freedom to make those choices and not force them. I mean, we're not like a, United Airlines, which I know and love because I fly out of San Francisco. They want you to, use the kiosk and check your own baggage. We understand that,
Mhm.
hey, I might want to do it differently. And that's the third thing, that having humans to work with, particularly as you build large systems. One of the biggest things that I find is that being able to talk to experts, not only in the database, but how you build applications on it, can have a can just alter the whole trajectory of your project. So and so as a result, we go really, really deep on support. We have people who are just outstanding experts in use of ClickHouse. And in fact, our whole, because we've always been, started out consulting, we've always been focused on building the app as opposed to selling the database technology. And so, and I'll just give you a concrete example. When you're building a big system, the best way to do it is to build a really little one first. Like basically put ClickHouse on a single host, load it up with
Mhm.
real production data, test the daylights out of it to find out what the capacity is, optimize that, and then think about scaling out, then think about
Mhm.
scaling up. But that's a very fundamental lesson, and being able to work with somebody that can work with you at that time, can get you to market faster and build systems that just work a lot better. So it's open source, run anywhere, deep supports that's focused on making your application work.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, being
And
open source
yeah,
is to me like I like making music, and I only use open source software for music also.
Mhm.
Because I feel like you don't want to be left without the tool that you use,
Yeah,
on your daily basis. And,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, so having that control, and then I think also as if you write code, a lot of using open source is personally motivated. In addition to the fact that for me, it's the ability for code that other people wrote, it's the fact that I can understand what they did because I can go, worst case, I can go look at the code.
yeah.
And then as a person who writes code, what's great about open source is it's out there and it can't be taken away from you.
Yeah.
So anything you produce, uh, you're not going to move to another job and just and lose this thing that you've created. I think that's a pretty fundamental
Yeah.
motivation for wanting to use open source.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like as an engineer, like
Yeah.
when I was at Lyft, I was working with Superset, and now
Mhm.
at Preset, I'm working with Superset.
Yeah.
And it's great for my career. I was at Lyft working on an open source project, and I can take that expertise with me
Yeah.
after I left the company. And I can
Plus,
show it to other people, and other people are
exactly.
benefiting.
People say,
They
show us a
benefit.
code sample, and you say,
Yeah.
well, go look at my commits. Now, for me, I don't have any commits to show in ClickHouse. I've written a lot of code, but most of it has been, with very, very few exceptions, been around connectivity, replication, applications that build on databases. But virtually nothing, related to database internals. That's a kind of a regret, actually. I'd like to change that before I finish up.
Changing gears a little bit, just wanted to check in. How's everybody's cocktail doing? Mine might have caused me to interrupt. I apologize for that. But,
No, this is very tasty, by the way. I'd recommend Boulevardiers to both of you.
I'm going to try that this evening.
Yeah, I'm going to try that.
But also, while we're talking about stuff, real stuff, I'm curious. The question we always ask our guests is, do you have anything weird or interesting or unusual on your desk that tells us a little bit more about you? Or it's just a random thing you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, so, well, I do have a number of weird things, but this is a 6-pound cast iron shot from the siege of Petersburg.
Oh, wow.
Really?
My grandparents, my mom was born in Petersburg, which is in Virginia, just south of Richmond. It was a key railroad junction in the Civil War. So it became the kind of the final battle of the Civil War was centered around a siege of this town, because once the Union forces took it, they cut off Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy, and basically won the war. So there's a lot of ordnance lying around in the fields, and when we were kids, we would you could go into the antique shops. Actually, if you had a metal detector, which was something we dreamed of but never were able to get, you could just go into like the so-called antique stores, and they would have these cannonballs lying around. And so that one that you're looking at cost me about $10 in 1970.
Oh, wow.
And I bought it with my allowance, and so I had it. I gave it to I made a pedestal for it. I gave it to my dad to take to his office, so he had it sitting on his desk for a number of years. And so we had, as kids, grew up thinking a lot about the Civil War. We lived in Alexandria, and even now, the Civil, if you're in the South, the Civil War doesn't seem that distant when you're there, particularly in places like Petersburg, where you're surrounded by battlefields, you have cemeteries, and it's something we thought about a lot. It's something we were constantly reading about the different battles. And also, I think you sort of learn, there's a lot of people are into war for the wrong reasons, or into war history for the wrong reasons. But one of the things you learn is these were unbelievably destructive struggles.
Yeah.
Which just were characterized by senseless killing. And even the generals who ran the war, people like Grant, who people think of a butcher, was thought of as a butcher by many people, realized just how many lives were being thrown away needlessly in this war, or in battle, or due to sickness. It gives you, I think, a much more measured view of how important it is to avoid this and not have this happen again. That's something we carried away.
Yeah.
So it's
cheers to that.
Yeah. Here's to not having that happen again.
A sobering thought for a podcast like this. Do you still harbor dreams of getting that metal detector?
No, because actually, well, let me show you why not.
Bonus round.
Yeah. That's not the only ordnance I own. This is a 20-pound Parrot, 20-pound round from a Parrot gun. It's I guess 4 inches, and this is actually, you can see right there that hole. That's where there used to be a fuse, and inside was an explosive, and so of course it would be fired into the city, and then the idea was it would blow up somewhere above or near the defenders. So yeah, we ended up getting a lot of this. We have sort of a collection of this stuff, and now that I'm a little bit older, I don't feel the need to have more of it. So I think we've got enough to go around.
Yeah.
And you can also make a really bad pun, decorate it around your Christmas tree and just say it's Christmas ordnance instead of ornament.
I don't think I don't think that would be remembered at my funeral if I did that.
That's funny.
I apologize. So taking it back to the talk about databases in your community and all of this good stuff. I guess what's something new or exciting coming up on your roadmap that you're excited about, or ClickHouse's roadmap for that matter, if you're following me on that?
Yeah, I think that there definitely is something. I think one of the things that's been really striking is, when ClickHouse first came out, it had this. It was groundbreaking because it was basically an analytic database that was as simple to run as MySQL. And no diss intended to Postgres, but the thing about MySQL is, you can just say apt install MySQL, and if you have a good internet connection, 60 seconds later, you're talking to MySQL. ClickHouse is that easy to install. Moreover, it worked off. It basically gave people the ability to have very, very powerful analytic. A very, very powerful analytic database that could process, sort of scan millions of rows per second just on a laptop. I mean, using a conventional Intel processor and some cheap hard drive or SSD, and so that's what got ClickHouse into the game. It was that ability to take this off-the-shelf hardware and combine it with compression, combine it with good parallel processing, and deliver very high performance. Well, what's happened since then is the data sets don't fit on laptops anymore, and they don't fit on block storage. You can run ClickHouse up to about 50 terabytes of block storage, and then it starts to get a little bit difficult to manage. What's happening now is we have a customer that we were talking to earlier this week about coming on board. They have about 10 petabytes of compressed data. This is sort of the day one data size. It's observability data, and these are just data sets that no longer fit inside a like a cloud service. They no longer are things you want to put in a data warehouse, and partly because of their size, but another reason is this data is being shared by multiple applications. So people talk about AI. How is AI going to integrate with analytics? If you ask me how it's going to integrate with the analytic databases, I have no idea. At the data level, though, it's much clearer. All of these applications want to share the same data. So think about it. There's different kinds of ways you can use observability data. You can have an analytic data. Let's take a security sort of information event management. You could have a data warehouse scanning the data, looking for trouble, polling incoming data, alerting you when there's something bad, like somebody's calling it, sending DNS requests to a known malware server. That's real-time data warehouse is what you want for that. But at the same time, you might have machine models that are trained to look for interesting things. You train those on the source data, the same data that's being used by that data warehouse. You also have data scientists who may be thinking about, strategically, thinking about different strategies for managing machinery, for handling security. They want direct access to the data using Python, pandas, so on and so forth. These are all people these are completely different use cases, but they all want to look at the same source data. And I think what this is doing is it's pushing these very large data sets into data lakes. People have been talking about them for a long time. They're starting to become real. And not only are they becoming real, but the file format that people are using has also consolidated around Parquet.
Yeah.
So this is something that even 2 to 3 years ago, we were not seeing this. We were still seeing people wanting to pull the data into ClickHouse. There was also more of a variety of formats that people were using. Now we're going into seeing people running trading systems, building observability, sort of log management systems. They've got the data out there already in Parquet. I think this is the next frontier for real-time data warehouses, is to be able to work with these, to work with to provide all the good things that that real-time data warehouse like ClickHouse already provides. The speed, the ability to aggregate and pre-aggregate, the ability to have sort of substitutes or handle joins, which are a really difficult problem if you want to have if you're also trying to get sub-second response.
Yeah.
Preserve those things, but also allow them to now take advantage of, to access these very, very large data sets on object storage. So it never gets boring on databases. This is the next thing that's not going to be boring.
I was going to say, that sounds like it could be a very interesting talk, which leads me to the part where I usually ask people what they'd like to shout out about, whether it's a conference they're attending or any other events like that. But I think you might have something coming up soon.
Well, amazingly enough, I'm doing a keynote at a conference that we're running together with you, Evan, called OSACon. It's Open Source Analytics Conference. We're doing it for the 4th year in a row, and it's devoted to open source analytics. It's virtual. It's free. It's running November 19th through 21st. We've got 42 really, really wonderful talks, including you, Evan. I believe you're a presenter. I'm doing a keynote pretty much on this topic that I was discussing about, state of analytic databases. We're really stoked about it. I think last year we started this. This is the 4th year we've done it. Last year we had 2,000 people sign up. It was 4 times the level of the previous year. And it's a very, very interesting topic. And I think what's great about analytics is there's just a really wonderful, there's a panoply of interesting technologies that cover all parts of the analytics stack, from, sort of the front end, the BI tools like what you guys are working on, all the way down to the core databases and even storage, things like Iceberg, for example, or Delta Lake. We cover them all at this conference. And I'd like to welcome anybody who's listening to it to come sign up for the conference. Not only that, hey, you can help us. It's open source. If you've ever been to FOSDEM, well, we want to create FOSDEM for analytics. Sort of volunteer run, a community that loves this stuff and is just, there to share and share and learn about open source analytics.
Yep, indeed. So yeah, help us build this community of communities. And if anyone from the Superset community is listening, which I know you are, there are going to be some very good Superset talks at this particular conference.
I think they're excellent. I personally looked at all of them. And and there's going to be some great ClickHouse ones. But you know what's cool? There's going to be things about DuckDB. There's going to be things about Druid. John Merlino is going to be there. Yeah. There's going to be things about workflow. Iceberg will be covered. So yeah, it's basically everything that everything in this many splendored field. We're going to be covering it, and you're all welcome to attend.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you, Robert, for joining us today and telling us about your origin story and what's coming up on the horizon. And thank you, Beto, as always.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.